Yo, my phone broke, so I'm using a backup phone. I haven't used this phone in literally like 5 years. It's been sitting in a drawer, so the quality might not be good. But I had a conversation with a guy yesterday, and he was telling me about the dangers of China's involvement with Africa. And it's an interesting topic because you can make a pretty good argument on both sides of the issue. You can make a pretty substantial argument that, you know, as usual, foreign powers are coming into Africa, pretending to be their friend, pretending to help them develop, and convincing them that the best bet for them to become eventual partners is temporary submission. Or you can make the argument that the massive task of lifting millions and millions of people out of poverty. They understand the threat of colonialism. Japan has been, on their bumper historically. China understands the need for an alternative structure within the world of finance. The West completely dominates the banking industry. So if you require any kind of investment, if you require any kind of foreign, let's say foreign relationships, it's typically done through Western-backed banks, the IMF, the World Bank. So if China can offer an alternative to Africa, which has historically been pretty much screwed by the West has conspired to kill a lot of Africa's presidents, and their newly independent nations after, their colonial hold was resisted. The West has applied apartheid to Africa and would actually tell you they're not racist. They just consider Africans to be less developed than them. Therefore, they need to have complete dominance over their entire GDP economy and natural resources. And any means of producing income, they must control it because the Africans are just so underdeveloped, and then the European is just so much more developed, as they like to say. They never used to say inferior or superior. They would just say more developed or less developed. Or the fact that a lot of African presidents couldn't deny the temptation of being westernized. So as soon as they come into power, they throw away all of their revolutionary ideals and become friends with the West and get to a point where they only care about keeping themselves financially wealthy and their friends, and just the whole experience of being rich totally changes their entire value system. It's like when you're from America and you come from a Western mentality, it's hard to detect because in America we're so accustomed to a certain way of thinking. We're so accustomed to certain concepts like democracy. And that's dangerous because we get to a point where we start to apply our own value system onto others. And it's hard to detect. But sometimes you gotta slow yourself down and say, okay, I am a westernized person. I grew up in America, therefore I'm gonna think like an American. So I must check myself when I'm judging the affairs of other parts of the world that aren't westernized. I can't apply Western ideology and philosophy to countries that have only been independent for 50 years. And throughout that 50-year history, it's been nothing but turmoil, tribal warfare, the inability to provide basic necessities to their people like waste management, education, literacy. You know what I mean? America and the West has never been, recently in history, have never been in a position where they had to lift literally millions of people out of poverty. People in the West don't know what it's like to live in a country that can't provide basic necessities for you. So it's easy to put yourself in a position where you look down on people and you criticize people for things that they do, attitudes that they have, relationships that they develop. So as far as the whole China thing, I think that it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. But instead of jumping to a conclusion, I think the best thing to do is just simply wait and see what happens. But as far as the Africans are concerned, they like the Chinese. They're excited to do business with them. They're excited about their future with the Chinese. As far as they're concerned, the Chinese understand their position. They understand that they were, newly independent countries that came from a lineage of colonialism. China can relate to that. They're ancient cultures that have existed for thousands and thousands of years. China can relate to that. They respect their own sovereignty, and they want others to respect their sovereignty. China can definitely relate to that. So I look at it like, hey, China is trying to engage in a relationship with Africa that's going to be mutually beneficial for both parties, and at the same time they're going to create an alternative form of economics that isn't dominated by the West. And I think that's a good thing. Because when Africa gets into a position where its GDP and its financial output can actually rival the West in a real way, then everybody's going to benefit. You can't expect one culture of the world to have complete domination over the world forever. You know what I mean? Just because you're from the West, just because you've been taught Western values, doesn't mean that you have the inherent right to completely dominate the world forever and ever. And alienate other cultures from exercising their sovereignty as a nation and experimenting with their democracy. So that's how I look at it. I think China's misunderstood. I think that America is afraid of China because they have this notion that if China benefits, if China advances, it's going to come at the behest of the West. You know what I mean? If China all of a sudden gets into a position where they're able to compete with America, compete with the West, compete with the financial systems of the West somehow is going to lose. And that's just a Western mentality in itself. The idea that you've got to hold on to this infrastructure of power because you're the only one who knows how to deal with it the right way. Peace, baby. Salute to Africa.